It's time to go beyond the headlines, cause I don't put in overtime just so I can headline. Okay, now it's Fox Sports, I'm live with Renee. Going hard every day, sports rapping every play. Different segments for your favorites, coming at you daily. With positive vibes, yeah, we some game changers. Basketball, football, soccer, with different interviews, you never know who may pop up. Listen, only on Beyond the Headlines, this is Beyond the Headlines. Only on Beyond the Headlines, this is Beyond the Headlines. Only on Beyond the Headlines, this is Beyond the Headlines with Renee Washington.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into another edition of Beyond the Headlines here on Fox Sports Radio. I'm your host, Renee Washington, and I'm excited to bring you this much-needed conversation. One thing about this show is we are not ever ignoring the major issues that need to be discussed. And today we're going to get into discussion around toxicity in the workplace, sexual harassment, women in sports, and just so much more with a great guest that we're going to have, Megan Imbert, who is one of over 100 former employees that have come out and been speaking up against her experiences when working with the Washington football team. So I hope you guys are ready, because in order to make change happen, we've got to talk about the elephant in the room and talk about the truth around the elephant in the room. So before we get into the show, I just want to remind you to take a moment to hit that subscribe button, keep up with all that we've got going on. Make sure that you're following the show each and every week as we're bringing you different topics around sports, news, music, entertainment. And so this week we are getting into a redefining us, having a discussion around the different stereotypes, victim blaming, sexual harassment, and other stigmas that are the reality that many people unfortunately have to deal with each and every day. So let's get into a little bit of redefining us here on Beyond the Headlines.
Here's our host, Renee Washington, with Redefining Us.
So we've got Emmy award-winning producer, editor, who now works in cybersecurity and is one of countless former employees of the Washington football team that has been speaking up to make this change happen based on her experiences. Megan Imbert, welcome to the show, Megan. How are you?
I'm good, Renee. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to join you tonight.
I am excited as well. And, it's a shame that this is how we're having the conversation and that this topic is what's bringing us together. But I'm hoping that we can stir the pot a little bit more in terms of shining a light on different aspects that are the reality for many women in sports and people in sports. But before we get into the heavy stuff, I want to ask, how are your holidays going? How's the season going for you so far?
It was great. I was actually able to visit my family back in the DC area for Thanksgiving. And I did show up at that Washington football Monday night game with my Release the Report shirt on. Not to get into all of that yet, but it was really nice to spend time with friends and family. And I love the Christmas holiday. So, Texas is my new home now. So I'm trying to make new traditions, but it's been great. How has yours been?
Well, I'm happy to hear yours went well. And I agree with you. I love just the magic of the season. And I am openly okay with admitting that I am the biggest sap with holiday movies. I was just watching one before the show. It's just to me, it's like a great way to kind of unwind. And like, although they're cheesy, I'm all about the cheesy. I need a good fake like fairy tale type of movie every once in a while, just to kind of decompress and get away from all that we're dealing with every day.
Hallmark channel's a lot different than yes. What are the crime shows and all that stuff.
Oh yeah. That's what it's all about. And everyone says, how do you watch them? The ending, they're cheesy. I'm all for it. I love it. I love every cheesy moment of it. So I do want to, of course, get into the fact that on a heavier note, you unfortunately are one of many employees that have worked with the Washington football team and come out and spoken up on your experiences. You worked with them starting as an intern back in 2006. You stopped working with them in 2011. Your choice to do so. But for those that are tuned in, share your work that you did. What was the role you held as an intern, as a producer, working with the Washington football team, and just kind of a synopsis or a Spark Notes version, I guess, of your years with the team.
Yeah, so I was a 19-year-old junior in college when I first joined the organization. In fact, obviously we have a lot of Sean Taylor stories. He was actually the person that opened the door for me when I walked into Redskin Park at the time for my interview, it was a cool experience for sure. And So I started out in media relations, and then the following season, I was a game day captain intern, which meant I basically would drive down from my school. I went to King's College, pretty much the halfway point between New York City and Philadelphia. So a lot of my friends are Eagles and Giants fans. It always interesting. And then following that year, I had the opportunity to be an intern under Larry Michaels' organization within the broadcast department. So I took that, and then I had the opportunity to have a full season internship, which then led to a full-time job, first starting out as a production assistant on to producer, and then I left there as production manager in 2011. So my role and responsibility toward the end of my career was really, everything that you would see at the stadium, the video boards, multiple television shows, filming interviews for everything. So all of the stuff that currently like Julie Donaldson's organization would manage, really the in-house department that would do all the different productions.
Yeah. So you had the opportunity to work in a lot of different roles. You started as an intern. I actually know King's College. I do. Ironically, I'm sure you don't
see it on 81. if they ever drive up 81, that might be where they see it.
I was doing an ESPN game for the women's basketball team, and King's College was actually playing the Monarchs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, coming in as a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed 19-year-old intern, excited to be working in the NFL, excited to have an opportunity to then see your roles changing. I'm sure that, you were just looking to grasp onto as much information and knowledge and experience as you possibly could. And what changed? What did you start to notice in your personal experience? Because as you and I were talking about before the show, it's important for just us to clarify, you left in 2011 on your own accord, not knowing everything else that was going on. So what was it that changed for you in your experiences when you started to realize time to go?
You're touching on something interesting for me too, is that, and sorry, Sky's here making her appearance.
I see her.
I apologize. So you're touching on something interesting where I really committed to this career, this opportunity as an intern. These were unpaid internships, long hours, really spending, holidays, all sorts of things. I even, that season internship, that was the fall season of my senior year of college. So you miss out on a lot of your college experience and other things, because I wanted to see what I could do with this opportunity. And I knew that this was really a once in a lifetime situation to make the most of it. So I really did sacrifice, I would say, even some of my personal life, family time, those kinds of things, because I was so focused on this as a career. I think that sports sometimes ends up becoming more of a lifestyle than I would say. It's not really a punch the clock 9 to 5 type of job. It's really around the clock. So as far as things changing, I would say my experience in the media relations department was a pretty good one. I think I was kind of protected by the folks that worked in that department at the time. And when you're working with the media corps too, you always have that lens of very careful what you're saying, making sure that, really, it's just a little bit different. And then when I moved on to Larry Michaels' department, which was more down the executive hallway, I really noticed a lot of things changing as far as exposure to different types of folks, different executives, hearing how they would talk to one another, treat the employees. That was kind of commonplace. I think the tipping point for me was, I'd been promoted technically, but never more pay. And I was already making very little money. So that was really challenging. And then add that on to really, really long hours. It was more or less like, okay, I have a wonderful resume and I've had some great experiences as far as exposure and access and meeting different people. Like there is a really interesting part of working in entertainment, but at the same time, it came to the point of where am I going from here? I'm subjecting myself to this environment that's toxic, full of harassment, barely getting paid for it. So I finally decided, I actually gave them 6 weeks notice of my departure, did not have a job lined up. I just knew enough was enough. I have to get out of here. The place was not aligning to my moral compass. And I noticed how people would even change as they were in that environment. And I didn't want that for myself either.
Yeah. So that is interesting. As you share, you just start to notice, and I'm sure it was very subtle ways where it went from being exciting and I'm looking forward to being here and I'm excited to learn, to, wait a minute, what am I putting up with? What am I signing up for? And, I think it is hard for a lot of people in any workplace to know whether is this just me? Am I perceiving this the wrong way? Or is this something bigger where it is unhealthy and a toxic situation? So how did you kind of decipher between that as you talk about, like, you started to notice that change where you realized not only was the pay not there, the time that you're putting in, but also just the comments, where was that line? Because I think that is hard, especially for women in sports. And I always tell people, everybody's line is different. What I'm willing to put up with might be different from the next person, but you all have to have that line of what you're willing to accept and tolerate as a person outside of the job, as a person. Where was that line for you? Was it a specific comment that you heard and that you'd be willing to share? What was it for you that changed?
It's a great question. I think a lot of us that experienced some of this and were really subjected to being kind of preyed upon, really, were those of us that started in our 19 to 21 age range. Like, I left there at 25. And I think when women especially are in an environment like that, where you're reminded every day people would do your job for free, you're kind of in this situation where you want to work in sports, you want to work in this industry. Oh, this is how it is. This must be what it is. And that was the impression a few of us that are actually out there speaking on record. We're not in the industry anymore. You're not going to see a lot of people speaking out if they're currently on the industry, right? Or they want, like, for me, if I was to submit my resume to, I don't know, one of the NFL teams right now, I'm pretty sure they know who I was and be like, not so sure. That's why this is a league-wide issue, right? Whereas it needs to evolve. So for me, I think it all kind of clicked somewhere around the age 24, 25, personal things in my life going on. And I really started to realize, like, I'm giving this place so much more of me. And my self-esteem was shrunk, my self-worth fell down, but something clicked where I finally was like, I am worth so much more than this. They do not deserve to have me make them any more money. Putting together videos for the sweet sales, all sorts of stuff that I'm just thinking, like, all these people are just treating everyone like garbage all the time. Or, you hear the comments left and right on, like, what people are wearing, talking about my body everywhere I went. Like, it was unprofessional and frankly, like, exhausting. I guess that's where it just kind of clicked for me, where I was like, I'm just done. I mean, I was putting together the documentary series of the making of the cheerleaders, Cheers and Tears. And at the time, Megan, obviously with the cheerleaders, we need to make them as sexy as possible. And just some of those comments too, I was like, this is enough. Like, I just don't want to be around this anymore.
Yeah. I'm sorry that you have gone through this, and I'm sorry that, so many people have. And I wish I could say that this is the first time, and I'm hoping it's the last, but I know that's not the case of a woman or anybody in sports. I know we're talking specifically about, as a woman in sports, the comments about your body and overly sexualizing things. But as you know, not everybody that has come forward has been female. So this is a part of a larger issue. And what's gone on with the Washington football team, although it's not small in any stretch of the imagination, is part of a much bigger issue around people with power, whether it's in sports, in politics, and other areas of the industry of the world, that take advantage of that. And as you mentioned, prey on younger individuals. Like you were saying, that word is so accurate, because it is hard when you are younger trying to climb the ladder. And you're replaceable, and people will remind you of that. Hey, I can there's hundreds of other people that would love to be in the job that you're in and do exactly what you're doing. Those subliminal messages of being replaceable and that we don't need you. So if you're not going to tolerate and put up with this sexual innuendo in these comments, we'll just replace you with somebody else that will. That's toxic. That's terrible. And that's unfortunately in situations like what you've dealt with, something that just grows and grows to the point that we now have over 100 people that are speaking up on it. So you told me before that you have a group thread, you keep in touch with the other women that have also gone through this. But the incredible thing to me was finding out that you didn't know about the cheerleading videos until about a year ago when everybody else is finding out about it. take us through that moment of, realizing that the department you were a part of was also a part of creating these sick, disgusting videos of the cheerleaders during their shoots in Costa Rica. And I forget where the other location was, but over a decade ago.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, how everything sort of transpired. So it was July 2020, the first Washington Post article released, and that was the one that had the allegations against my former boss in it. And naturally, so the Washington Post actually had been trying to get in touch with me for about 3 years. So Will Hobson and this team had been working on this story for a long time. And that just goes to show too, for listeners, like, they're a really credible organization. They will not publish anything unless it's corroborated. I have a renewed sense of respect for media publications that go that route with their sources as well, because we do have information and we're waiting for some corroboration. Like, there's these things where it gets really frustrating in this process. Like, oh gosh, I want everyone to speak up. So that July, after that first article posted, my phone was blowing up. People were asking me, Megan, are you okay? I had no idea that this was going on and all of this. So it was very overwhelming. And as I sat there, I had a visceral reaction. I got emotional. I couldn't believe this was on the front page of the Washington Post. All of this that we all knew had been going on, that we personally were impacted by, was now public, on display, going to this news. It was just shocking. So I had taken that weekend. I remember it was like a Thursday or Friday. I had taken that weekend to really think about things. And I always had this gut impression based on a clip I had seen. It was in the playback machine of really, really hyper zoomed in portion of a woman's, bikini bottom area, something that I certainly wouldn't want anybody to be zooming in. And, they were rolling the B-roll, so it just never stopped. And these were times where women probably didn't even realize, or, I didn't want to think anything of it because I didn't see it in a sequence. I didn't actually see the context. So it was just kind of like, kind of weird that would be even being filmed.
Right.
And I just remember seeing that. And at the time, I think I was probably a production assistant or maybe even still an intern at the time. And I remember 2 people had reached out to me after that article that would have been in my department, Brad Baker being one of them, who's on record. And I just asked straight up, did you know of or have anything to do with production of anything inappropriate with the cheerleaders? Neither of these people knew that I was talking to them. And within 5 minutes, both responded yes. Renee, I dropped my phone. I started to cry. I couldn't even believe hearing that. It just happened so fast. And then I had some separate conversations, and, the next article in August came out where we were able to confirm the 2008 and 2010 videos, which makes me believe, where's 2009? I left in 2011. I was never a part of those projects. So I feel completely betrayed by this. And on top of it, this is a crime. In my opinion, These are like softcore porn set to Dan Snyder's favorite bands at the direction of Larry Michael at the time. But it's very disappointing. And what's even more disappointing are the people that I believe that have been involved just continue on their path in sports and thriving. Meanwhile, someone like myself, I couldn't take it anymore and I had to get out of there. But so I think it just had a personal response for me too, and just sheer disappointment. Like, I've known Larry, for example, since I was 19 years old. I'm 35 now. It's just really, it's hurtful. It's disappointing. It's disgusting. And you have these cheerleaders that were completely violated and trusted the people that were around them. So for me, that was a pinnacle moment in this situation where I went from a few days prior saying that I was going to be anonymous. I'd start contributing. But first I wanted to lawyer up. And then second, a few seconds later, all of a sudden I'm talking to Will Hobson and I have a lawyer and I'm like, put my name on this because this is so appalling.
Yeah. Wow. So, I mean, as you mentioned, you leave in 2011 on your own accord and you find out in 2020 that in the midst of those 5 years you were there, this had all been going on. And again, like you're saying, you got a glimpse of it and you had no idea just the magnitude of what was really going on, which does leave you asking bigger questions of where are the other videos, what happened in the years. Something like this doesn't just start. What led to this?
Who watched it? Who has access to
How
it?
many people have
Where are
seen
the
it?
DVD copies? What other shady things were going on? Which is why we've been so vocal about need for transparency of the report in order to know if other people came forward. I pleaded with former colleagues through Chris Russell and Sports Illustrated to please come forward, participate in that investigation, whatever you know. And then secondly, in order for Roger Goodell or anyone else to say that the organization's been held accountable, or Dan Snyder or whatnot, there has to be transparency. And that is what is lacking here. And what we see from the Gruden emails, you can't tell me the head coach of another team out of 650,000 emails is the collateral damage here.
Correct.
It's just insulting to people's intelligence. And frankly, at this point, I'm upset with Roger Goodell. I'm upset with the handling of the entire situation.
Yeah.
Deflategate. Sorry to cut you off. This got my train of thought here. Deflategate, PSIs of game balls, was a 243-page report. We have over 120 people participating in an investigation about the treatment of human beings, resulting in a 0-page verbal updated report. Yep. And you can't tell me there aren't any notes from that. People spent hours with investigators. So it's not that hard to redact names. And for him to come out and say that he's protecting us is again, another thing that just makes my blood pressure boil. If I'm being completely real with you.
It is sad when you put it that's clear of they can really do some research and digging on what's important to them. The Deflategate is still something that gets talked about. And as you mentioned, there's paperwork, there's a paper trail, there's all this research, there's all this information that's gone into it. And this is over whether or not the footballs had the right amount of air in them. But when we're talking about actual people, somebody's daughter, sister, wife, mother that has been violated because the thought is, oh, they're just being sensitive. Oh, they're just, overthinking things. It's quick to let's just sweep it under the rug and pacify this and act like it didn't happen. So I'm sure you've dealt with, unfortunately for you and all of those that have spoken up, your fair share of people that have gone against, and just kind of disregarded what you've said. So before we get into release the report, I do want to ask kind of the feedback you've been getting. Do you feel like it's getting better where more people are listening? Do you still get, hopefully not, but the message, the troll, those types of people as well? What's kind of the response?
I think if anyone ever is in my position, make sure you do a Twitter tutorial, because there's either the bots or there's it's just kind of funny. It actually has been, I would say, overwhelmingly supportive. I think the majority of the people out there, once educated on what's going on, are like, oh, this is absolutely wrong, So from that perspective, I think that it has gained momentum to the point that it has Congress's attention now. So while the team is performing well and it might seem a little quiet, we definitely have the interest of the Oversight Committee. And we've already said we'll participate however needed, provide whatever information they want. So we're hoping for a hearing. We haven't had an update on that, obviously, publicly or anything. So I'm just hoping that, when the new year comes, this is not something that gets ignored.
Yeah, I hope not. I hope this is, I think around 2020, especially, the videos come out, the pandemic, Black Lives Matter. There's been so many different fights, the entire Me Too movement. There's been a lot more around clarity and transparency and just really, speaking up and understand that, like you were even saying, it's okay to speak up and you can still get another job. It's sad that this is
society evolving. It's society having to evolve. Slowly. I have gotten some feedback, both positive and negative. Some people are like, oh, well, workplaces won't appreciate that. And then I'm like, the workplace I want to be at would appreciate diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I think the times have to change and evolve. And then separately, I've had recruiters reach out like, we know that you're a leader with integrity. So they're seeing that side of it too. Like, you literally put your name, your reputation to this, which is a powerful statement too. And I know it's scary, but I do think if you look at the history, whenever people, sorry, Sky's over here snoring, he's here. When you look at history, the big moments of change in time are those where people are courageous and come forward. So that's my hope, is that it doesn't go anywhere. People continue to speak up about it. And what you were talking about was beautifully stated, where I think this is the intersection point of Black Lives Matter, Me Too movement, kind of when it comes to professional sports. I think underrepresented communities that are working in the NFL, especially as we saw from the Gruden emails, you're talking about homophobic, racist, misogynistic comments, and who knows, these cheerleader pictures or whatever. But I would think the players and coaches, especially when you look at 70% of the league is Black, 3 head coaches. I could be inaccurate because I haven't been following, but I think it's
not a high number.
It's under a handful, right? Which is a joke. I mean, so when it comes down to it, I think I'm hoping we're going to start to see more players, coaches, other people be vocal. It's unfortunate that sometimes in this type of environment, they're scared too. They either have money on the line or other things. And I just hope people realize that this is a moment in time we can't let pass by. And hopefully, this is going to be a part of my legacy in my life, is like, I'm not going to back down from this conversation because it's so vitally important.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like, where do you draw the line? And I know I have had many conversations around this topic, especially of how do you deal with, a toxic workplace? How do you deal with being in a situation where you feel like you're being mistreated, but you are trying to climb the ladder and you don't want your name to be and your reputation to be changed in that way, where people are afraid to hire you or whatever, or there's backlash because somebody knows somebody who knows somebody. And now before you even apply to those jobs, you're already getting denied because of the connections of the people you spoke out on. And what I always tell people is, in my opinion, if a job, and I will say this until I can't say this anymore, if a company or a job does not want to hire you for speaking up against what's wrong, it's a company you don't want to work for. And I know that's easier said than done, but that's the harsh reality of it. And as you're sharing, you've had on the other side people that have commended you and reached out because of you speaking up. Those are the types of places that you want to be in. So for anybody that's dealing with this, that is key in understanding that if you're fearing you're going to lose your job or you're not going to get a job or whatever else, that's fine, because there's something better that will be better aligned with you. So where are we at with Release the Report? I as you mentioned, you showed up to the game Monday night, you had your shirt on, you're still pushing the narrative as well as many others. What is the update on Release the Report? As you're saying, it is getting better. We are getting closer, but where are we at now?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. And I think Release the Report was kind of a good initiative to get fans involved. And even at the Raider game, Raider Nation was supporting the hashtag. People were printing out signs.
By the way.
What was that?
As they should, especially with the email.
Exactly. So I think it's been interesting. More and more people are getting exposure and getting educated. So I think at this point, it really is just seeing what Congress decides to do. And we realize, once December hits and then there's holiday and stuff, there might be a little bit of a lull. But our hope is that they decide that they want to have a hearing. Separately, I'm curious about Gruden and whether or not his case goes to trial, because I would think his lawyers could probably at least subpoena the other 640,000 emails in addition to potentially Beth Wilkinson's findings. So my hope is that there's a couple avenues, and obviously public pressure would be great too. And I mean, we wrote letters to the sponsors as well, and still we heard nothing. No comment from any major NFL sponsor, which is just very telling, I think, as to how intertwined this whole, it's such a massive money generating machine.
It's definitely messy because it goes so deep, in that unfortunately we live in a world where the bottom dollar is what's important. Money talks. And so for sponsors and anybody that's financially involved, yes, exactly. It's sad.
It's shocking. It's also shocking to people probably like the Snyder camp and others that we are good human beings that are actually doing this for the betterment of the future and workplaces free from harassment, discrimination. Just as good human beings. It's just
There's
Nothing
no
to
ulterior motive other than to be able to create better workplace environments. That's it. That is all that the goal is here. So
we
as
all
the
signed up
emails
for a hell of a lot more stress and anxiety. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So
As the emails came out, and I mean, here's looking at the timeline of it. You know, you're going through your own experiences when you worked there. You leave in 2011. I'm not sure what happened between 2011 and 2020, but since 2020 and the cheerleading videos came out, John Gruden's emails came out not too long ago. It's like there's more and more that's slowly coming out. As you have conversations with others, you know, what has been kind of the response emotionally? You know, as we talk about what's been happening and the change that's being done, as you were even talking about with me before the show, this has been a lot, you know, emotionally and mentally as well. You know, talk about the kind of the camaraderie to kind of support each other through all this, because I imagine it cannot be easy.
So it's an interesting thing with layers to it, right? I think it's kind of lonely out here with what we're doing. The few of us that are out here talking, we have us as a support system because no one knows what this feels like unless you've been in it. And unfortunately, that's a weird club we're now a part of, where, you know, I'm even watching this, you know, the Epstein trial and stuff. And I'm hearing like the survivors talk, and I'm like, I like my heart, I feel it for them. Like, this is so incredibly just, you get all these emotions back flooding. I will say though, there's plenty of people in the background, I would say, that participated in the investigation that do kind of root us on separately. But again, I think unless people really know what it feels like to do the stuff like on record, do the interviews, really put ourselves out there, it's just a different feeling. So I'm really proud of our efforts. When you really think about the scheme of time, it's been about 17 months since that original July, if my math is correct, mid-December now.
Sounds about right.
But to have Congress's attention, I think, is a really big deal. I do think there's been waves of emotion throughout this thing. So obviously, one of the pinnacle moments for me that was really upsetting was when, you know, the NFL, Roger Goodell in particular, approved and allowed the Snyders to get 100% ownership of the team while the investigation was going on. The fact that they allowed an avenue for Dan Snyder to name Tanya Snyder as co-CEO of the team, I think that was incredibly irresponsible. And to say that she hasn't been a part of that organization is also false. So it's hard when you have been on the inside to hear the narrative. There was a moment in time when I worked there where they wanted Tanya to be the face of the brand too. You know, I've heard this before, right? So we see all of it, and it's one of those things where I'm sure we'll hear about the name when like something else is about to come out, right? Like I feel like they have a room there just to like, okay, what's the next story? So for me, emotionally, there's been a wave. Right now, I just feel like we're at this point where we've done, at the end of the day, I have done everything in my power to try to make this right, to try to make sure that these findings are released. I don't know what else one person or this small little quorum of women, what we could do, from writing the letters to trying to talk to staffers at Congress, to do all these things. At the end of the day, I have to feel satisfied with what we've done, because in addition to our full-time jobs, this has also become full-time after hours. What can we do? So from my perspective, at the end of the day, I do feel like we've done a really valiant effort, as have like the press and everything. But to keep in mind, it's only been 17 months, and this is a massive machine that we're up against. So I think we've made a lot of great progress, but emotionally, it depends on the day, to be honest with you. Self-care is just really important. Making sure we're eating well, drinking a lot of water, getting our sleep, exercising, and also like knowing enough. We've done a great job of, like, if there was an interview and someone's just mentally not there, covering for each other and just being there. So it's just realizing what space are you in that day, and making sure you're taking care of yourself.
Yeah, again, I am sorry that you guys are going through this. And, you know, as you mentioned, a lot of change that has happened when you look at our history for minorities, whether it's gender, racial, socioeconomic, any level of minority, any sort of discrimination, harassment, toxic environments that has changed, has come on the backs of people like yourself that have been willing to really take charge of leading that and being okay being the person that has to deal with all of it. As you mentioned, this is not an easy thing. This is not something where you guys woke up one day and said, you know what, let's have people all in our DMs and interviews left and right, and people prying into our experiences and having to talk about this over and over again too, which is hard.
And I mean, you're talking about the Snyder Camp use, private investigators and other things. Like this has not been an easy road for some people. And then on top of it, while I know the NFL itself is making efforts with inspired change or, forward progress, it just feels so hypocritical when you have Roger's wife doing a podcast on forward progress when he has 2 daughters that I think are twins, 20 years old, and you're not going to release this information. And I understand why. Why would you implicate yourself or other people necessarily? Because he's hired to protect the owners. Correct. But when you see all of this, I think they're even getting a TV show next year on the Forward Progress Initiative with the league. And it's like you need to really see where you are to evolve. And I'm sorry, if there's people that have to face consequences, then that is what needs to happen.
Yeah. Yep. And that's the thing. This is not an opportunity for just a publicity or PR stunt. This is an opportunity for actual change. And unfortunately, I always there's this post I saw at one spot on social media, and it was saying how like at one point the Holocaust was seen as like legal, slavery was seen as legal, like all these different things over the years that have been at one point seen as okay, and this is legal and this is the norm. And now we're having these conversations of no, this is not the norm. If anybody felt like they were mistreated, and then you have actual physical things like the video that come out, this has to be addressed. There should be an HR system in place. There should be protocols in place. There should be action and repercussion and consequences for those that violate others and prey on others, as you've shared, and as we've been seeing the different stories that have come out shared. So it is just appalling to me. But I always say I wish I could be surprised, but I'm not surprised in this situation or any that we're still dealing with this. What is your advice for others before you come into that point? What is your advice for anybody that's dealing with a toxic situation of knowing how to like navigate and just encouraging them on ways to kind of draw that line and figure out how much you're willing to tolerate and work through a toxic situation?
I think there's probably some layers here too, depending on the industry someone's in or what type of company it is, how large it is. I would say if you're interviewing for an organization and you don't have the job yet, I would ask some specific questions related to the culture. What is that work-life balance? What kind of protocols do they have in place? I would ask some specific questions related to leadership styles and remember that you're interviewing an organization just as much as they're interviewing you. And chances are they need you more than you need them. I mean, we all have bills to pay, but, if you're in a toxic environment, that's going to cause health problems, stress, so many other things. And then if you're being harassed, it can have other issues too. Now, if you're in a workplace like that, certainly you'd want to be able to, I would say first things first, document things on your own. Dates, times, the experience. If you're comfortable, maybe even having remember writing down if anyone witnessed what had happened. I would say, depending on the situation, any manager, any leader, anyone that's above you in an organization has a responsibility if a subordinate comes to them with some information to share, to then go to HR with. I think that there's protocols in place that should happen, like workplace trainings and review cycles and those kinds of things. And there needs to be an ability to have proper feedback. A lot of organizations have anonymous lines or ability to talk to HR. And keeping in mind retaliation, that is a real thing, but it's also not allowed. So correct. I would say my biggest piece of advice too, especially if you tend to be like for a female in a male dominated industry or something like that, I would have some trusted mentors and people around you that do things the right way. emulate the leadership style that is healthy, is going to be someone that will be supportive and kind of someone that you trust in the event that something does happen, or I would consider them to kind of be allies. Like I'll give a simple example. I was at a company one time, and this was a New York office, a bunch of men in a room, and getting interrupted, right, or talked over, which is not really uncommon. But one of the male leaders was like, "Wait a second, Megan wasn't done. What else did you need to say?" That has stuck with me because it was a huge room of people, and I was pretty junior at the time. But the fact that he noticed it and stopped everyone, it's very simple and it's not rude. It's just you let her finish the thought and keep going, kind of thing. And just I think for everyone to pay attention to just how we treat one another, especially in the pandemic and remote working still real. There's a hybrid environment. Checking in with yourself throughout the day as well is going to be helpful. And I think that's true too, where someone might have the best of intention, but then they're not handling stress well or something like that. So definitely document things and try to have some people that you could go to. HR is supposed to be a resource to go to, but make sure that you follow up and know that retaliation, or if you don't feel like they're doing their job, then there needs to be going up the chain or being a whistleblower in some instances. I have a friend of mine that came out in that one of the recent Philadelphia stories where the N-word was used, and she's one of the whistleblowers there. I'm just so proud of her because no one wants to do this. No one wants to come out publicly and talk about things, but sometimes that needs to happen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I like the different levels of what you've shared of having those allies and people that you can turn to, and even just people that can help support you, as you were saying, somebody that can speak up for you in the room and have your back, as well as even just knowing who you can turn to in terms of like HR, if you have to take that next step and report it, and making sure that you are just aware that retaliation is definitely illegal. It's not allowed.
Yeah. And I would also say, like, for managers, so I have a team of people I've been managing now for a few years. And this is interesting that this all has come out as I have people that I'm responsible for. And, it's an interesting one because on so many levels, I think I'm hoping they know I'm someone that's going to fight the good fight for them and be someone of integrity and try to make sure that they feel like this is a trusted, safe environment. And I think as a manager, it's really important to build that rapport with your team, get to know them as people in an appropriate way, of course, but build that relationship where you really trust them as human beings. It's, there's courses also on diversity, equity, and inclusion, recruiting, staffing, even emotional intelligence, and building that muscle if people are lacking. I think it's just really important. Even in this environment, we have really, really long days sometimes, and people might be at home with their kids, and just understanding their life is going to help just entirely make for a healthier environment, not just, aside from like harassment and toxicity, it's just how do people feel like they can experience joy and be healthy.
Yeah. Wow, you're absolutely right. Of just the awareness, building those relationships, getting to know people, a little bit of just what is their norm, where if they're working from home, what is their routine, their childcare, pets, even. So just getting a sense. Exactly. I've been seeing her back there knocked out, chilling. So last couple things before we wrap up.
Sure.
My first question for you is, as you mentioned, it's only been 17 months since that July 2020 release of the videos. How has this all changed you for the better? I think so many people also focus on like the negative, and of course there's a lot of emotions that come with this, but everything happens for a reason. And I'm curious to know, for you as a strong woman that is helping to lead this charge, what are some of the ways that all of this has helped you for the better?
So it's a surreal experience. And I love this question. I have a lot of time to reflect. I moved away from the DC area right before the pandemic. So timing was weird being down here by myself, really. To have all of that happen, I thought I was always a resilient person, but I really learned resiliency the past 17 months. And I also learned what my red flag deal breakers are, my boundaries, to a different level, a respectful level, but one that needed to happen. I also was able to really think through my work style. I did a lot out of fear of always being replaced, or fear of something not being good enough. And so I've had to deal with a little bit of that, which I think is a positive to get me to a healthier place as both an employee and in general with boundaries in life. But I would definitely say probably the resiliency, because I think, and also I've always been hopeful. So you mix that with the passion I've always had and the hope and this fight. It's kind of like we're a persistent group of ladies, but I think it's our resiliency that for me, it's stood out, where it's like I've done, great, I've had support behind the scenes, but like physically here's the wild thing. Emily was my neighbor and I never knew her down here in Texas. And it's wild because we learned this right away. And I was like, we never knew each other. But when this happened, I'm like, there's a reason. Like, how random is that? Like,
wow.
So things like that have kind of happened where I'm like, what? Like, how are you like my neighbor? And we never, you know what I mean? And then this happened and it's just wild. So I just kind of think trusting your intuition is another big one. I mean, the videos itself and some other things. And also learn to be gentle with yourself too, I would say. Is something that I've learned over the course of the past 17 months. Like, what do I mentally have the capacity for today? It's kind of self-preservation. So I think those are good things. I think it's really learning, like, I can handle this today. I can't, you know what I mean? So.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like it definitely allows you to learn about a lot about your own resilience and strength, you know, in these moments. So what are your final?
The last thing I was going to say, this just dawned on me, was it's really moving and inspiring when we learn of people that have found their voice because of us speaking out. There's been more people coming forward talking about just how they've come forward. And then on top of it, you're seeing other sports organizations and other things where, as I talk to some media folks, they're like, I'm sure like everyone's starting to get support together. And I think that that's really incredible. And it obviously means a lot because it really can change people's lives.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, because I know even in soccer, we just had the reports come out around a lot of different players that were had spoken up about the toxic environments and comments and behaviors that were going on that had been swept under the rug for so many years, that spoke up again and now we're heard, you know? So I definitely think that through, you know, each of you speaking up helps to encourage them to speak up, which helps to encourage somebody else to speak up, because, you know, it is strength in numbers too. Of if you feel like you're the only one dealing with this and you don't know who to turn to or how to go about getting the help and support that you need, when you see, okay, here's Megan Imbert and countless others that are speaking up, here's NWSL players, you know, I can do this too, like them. So I like that piece you added in about just also being able to inspire and encourage others to speak up, and knowing that you don't have to suffer through this by yourself, and you definitely don't have to put up with it. So what are your final thoughts? Anything else you want to share? I know it's been a very hectic roller coaster ride, emotional, informative, just a lot that's gone on in the last 17 months alone. But any final thoughts, information that you want to share before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, as I personally reflect on my life, you've asked some great questions just in reflecting. And as much as it was upsetting when I left and the terms that I left and all of that, and how this is all resurfaced 10 years later and all of that, I really feel like all of those moments and all of those things have accumulated to this point that it re-energized my sense of realizing, like, there is a bigger purpose here. This is an interesting thing that now I'm able to be a part of to help. And my kind of that fearlessness, that passion, that energy, that storytelling as well. Like, I guess I'm grateful that I was able to become the woman I am today, but it's been due to so many of those other experiences too. And it's not, and for anyone listening that's gone through things that are hard to deal with, things that cause PTSD, et cetera, I feel for you, but just know that that doesn't define you. And, you can get that strength, sorry, you can get that strength from just focusing on how you can make your life positive as well. And when a moment like this might arise, sometimes the test isn't on paper. So for me, I just appreciate the fans. And even if you're not an NFL fan, hopefully we get more people educated on what's been going on and realizing how just atrocious this entire investigation has been, and that we really need to have transparency into the findings in order to have accountability.
Yeah. And it is eye-opening for you. It's been 10 years, and maybe that 10 years was time that in a way helped you to be able to get on your own feet. And now you're down in Texas, and now you do feel stronger in who you are as a person to be able to openly speak up. But for some others, it might not be that same amount of time. Everybody's timing of, when you fight this fight varies. So even as you're sharing, of being able to trust that, whenever you decide to speak up, whenever you decide to get that support, people will be there to help you. So that in itself is very empowering. Where can people get more information, follow, is there, or even if they just want to reach out, just plug.
Yeah, I would say probably if they're on Twitter, Megan Imbert, or, I am on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn as well. Under my name is fine. We don't have any sort of real website or anything. We do have a petition going that people can support. And then I think for about 5 or 6 more days, we have the Release the Report, hoodie, shirts. Those are all available in at least the burgundy and gold colors. 100% of those proceeds go to the National Women's Law Center as well. And then I know if you're not a Washington football team fan, we are happy to provide the logo in other colors for you to get one to support, with your team as well. We would appreciate it. It's been fun to actually see the fans rallying around it. It's been nice. But yeah, we really appreciate the support, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. I appreciate you taking time to join me on the show. I know we went a little bit over, but you shared so many great points and so much insight and just encouraging words that, as you mentioned, although you're in this fight with many others, there are so many other people that you're reaching and that you're inspiring and hopefully helping to be a part of this change that is also needed in the workplace to avoid this toxicity. Such a tongue twister that has gone on, unfortunately, in these prestigious organizations. So thank you so much, Megan. I wish you the best of luck. I am, going to continue to follow and support and promote any way that I can on my end, all the great work that you are each doing to really bring this terrible issue to light and get the change that is so definitely needed. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Renee. Appreciate you.
Yes. And for everybody tuning in, again, be sure to give Megan a follow at Megan Imbert with an I on social media, so you can continue to keep up with all that she's doing and the great work that everyone that has been speaking up has been doing behind the scenes. Look, sometimes these conversations, and many times I should say, are so needed to be able to address these topics that may not always be easy to talk about, but need to be talked about in order for real change to happen. So thank you all for tuning in to another edition of Beyond the Headlines. I hope you have a great rest of your week. We'll be back next week with more content and interviews as we're getting into more sports. We've got music lined up. We've got entertainment lined up. So a lot more coming your way next week here on Beyond the Headlines. Have a great rest of your day. Stay blessed, and I'll see you next time here on Beyond the Headlines. Bye.
Only on Beyond the Headlines. This is Beyond the Headlines. Only on Beyond the Headlines. This is Beyond the Headlines. Only on Beyond the Headlines. This is Beyond the Headlines with Renee Washington.